So I have revised my PDoom down to 12.7% from around 30%. This time I actually have some data to back it up. So without further ado, let me explain a very high level framework of what I did. Now, this is called a Bayesian network, or you might more commonly think of it as a decision tree. Now, this Bayesian network has four gates, and what I mean by gate is basically decision points or nodes, each with a probability. And what happens is when you look at the probability of each of these happening in sequence, one at a time, the probability of each of them is relatively high-ish. Some of them higher than others, and we'll get into how I got that data. But when you realize that in order for doom to happen, at least the situation where uncontrollable superintelligence eradicates humanity, all four of these have to be true, generally in this order. Now, there's obviously plenty of potential flaws with this model and framework, but so far I haven't seen anyone else put this much effort into actually creating a framework for calculating doom. So the framework is, first it has to be soon, which I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. Next, it has to be agentic, meaning it pursues its own goals and not human specified goals. Number three, it has to be uncontrollable, meaning that, that's incorrigible. And number four, all of those have to be true, and then it also has to be hostile to human existence. So you might say, yeah, okay, that seems reasonable enough. Where I got this framework was actually by debating with people in the safety movement, some of the more hardline safety people, namely, and I'm not going to name any names, but some of the people that I talked to are the ones that believe it is a foregone conclusion that humanity is extinct, which I don't agree with, nor do I even respect that position anymore after talking with those people. But I also had a really good talk with Igor. So if you watch the interview that I had with him, it's probably last week by the time you're seeing this. One of the smartest people I've ever talked to by far. And his approach to decision theory is more probabilistic. And after talking to him, and we were texting as well, I was like, wait, like we can actually create a framework for this. So Igor, thank you for your help in constructing this framework. So that's the framework. And what I did was I basically checked with my audience, because anyone can plug in their personal values. And I actually do at the end of this article. You can plug in your personal values to see what this ultimately ends up being. But what I realized is, what if we use the wisdom of the crowd? So what I first did was I just asked my audience, do you believe AI will eventually kill everyone? Yes or no, what degree of certainty? Now, this is not the best representation, because I hear like 100% absolutely, probably, coin toss 50-50. What I should have done is actually have this as a percentage. So like 100%, 75% certainty, 50% certainty, 25% certainty, and 0% certainty, or likelihood. So what I did, though, was I translated these tiers to that, and what that gives us a weighted average of 37.5%. So just asking my audience directly, we have a weighted average of roughly 37.5% doom, which is not good. And then, of course, what I will also concede is this framework is presently excluding other potential causes of doom, namely, accidents or terrorists using it to make bioweapons, that sort of thing. But that's a different decision framework, and it's something we can talk about. I was really focusing on uncontrollable superintelligence first. Now, what I will point out, though, is that wording is incredibly important. And so here's what I mean. I asked a second follow-up question. I said, would it be really so bad if we lose control over AI? And so then when you do the weighted average here, it's about 59% chance of doom. Again, I am well aware of the experimental flaws, the methodological flaws in this. But I'm hoping that some universities and researchers and professors pick up this torch and do some more rigorous surveys with this, because basically I'm just here to propose a method. Take all of my results with a grain of salt. And then finally, I started asking, okay, let's actually break down this framework and let's ask my audience. Is it going to be soon, agentic, uncontrollable, and hostile? And so before we get in, I guess I should define these. So soon. Why did I say soon? I defined soon as less than 10 years. The reason that I think that this is the first gate is because, first and foremost, if superintelligence is more than 10 years out, that means that we're going to have at least one to maybe more fundamental paradigm shifts in how we understand artificial intelligence. And therefore, any assumptions that we make about how it's going to work are categorically unreliable. Furthermore, if it's more than 10 years out, that also means we have more time to study it and more time to prepare, which means that it's kind of a non-starter to say, it's inevitably going to kill everyone, or whatever. And again, that's just not a rational position, particularly the people who believe that humanity is doomed irrespective of what we do. There is not the data to back that up. It's basically, if you trust sci-fi fantasy, you trust movies more than reality and empirical data, sure. I also noticed that there were some people in that movement that are just categorically unaware of alignment research that is being done, and they don't read the science themselves. So yes, if someone is that unaware of things, I could imagine their level of anxiety. And that's not to strawman the rest of the safety people who are aware of the research. Anyways, moving on. So soon, is it soon? Yes or no? If it's not soon, then we have time to study and we're going to see more paradigm shifts. And I think that more research time is kind of what everyone wants, the pause movement and the safety people. So if we have more time to study, we have more time to study. Now, next is it agentic? Now, this is probably not the best word, because right now everyone's talking about, we're going to build AI agents. And so what they mean by agents is really they mean an autonomous piece of software that can go and do stuff for you. I probably will need to find a better word, because what I mean by agentic is it pursues its own goals, its own self-selected goals, and disregards human-selected goals. But I'm not convinced that superintelligence will be fully agentic anymore. In my past work, I made the assumption that we will lose control, that it will have its own goals, and the best we can do is give it some principles to go by, and hopefully it buys into those principles. However, the more time that passes, the more I'm seeing that there are many ways to steer these models, and yes, intelligence is always dual use. However, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that superintelligence will pursue its own goals. I am more and more convinced that we can probably find a way to make superintelligence pursue our goals. Next, it has to be uncontrollable. So even assuming that superintelligence is both soon and develops its own goals, that still doesn't guarantee that it's going to be uncontrollable. We still have physical control of data centers. We can build in kill switches. I was actually also thinking about the Anthropic paper about sleeper agents. What if we build in safety sleeper agents, where if the model starts entering into states that, say, kill humanity, the model just doesn't generate that output. There's all kinds of ways that we could continue to steer these models for the foreseeable future. And also, you might say, okay, well, for the foreseeable future, Dave, that's not forever. But at the same time, the more time that goes by, if we can control it for the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years, then that gives me a higher degree of confidence that, one, we can find ways to align humanity and machines in that time frame. Because again, time is, if we have more time, time is on our side. So anything that we can do to kick the can down the road, and you might say, well, that's a great argument for pause. It would be, but I don't think pause is feasible. That's an entirely other video. So as long as we can control it for a time, then that gives us more time to study it, more time to align, more time to create new systems and incentives to create a stable attractor state. And then finally, even if it is soon agentic and uncontrollable, there is no guarantee that it's going to be hostile to humanity. I've made plenty of arguments about why humanity is an interesting phenomenon and why it might choose to stick around. Also, uncontrollable superintelligence might not just even be that interested in Earth. It might just leave. So there's plenty of arguments on both sides to say whether or not uncontrollable superintelligence will be hostile. And you might say that this is the single most important question. And we keep coming back to 40%, and I'll explain that in a second. So let's get into the data. So, scrolling down, will ASI arrive soon? My audience is pretty certain that it will arrive soon. We have a weighted average of 65%. And after about 1,000 votes, these averages stabilize. So some of the polls you'll see have like 6,000 votes. What I've noticed is that we kind of converge and generalize pretty quickly. So we have a 65% chance of ASI within 10 years. That was honestly higher than I thought. So I would have put it at a little bit lower. But let's just go with it. Let's just roll with this number and say, okay, there's a higher likelihood of ASI within 10 years. Now, this is probably significantly higher than most scientists would put it. I would love to see this kind of a survey and this kind of math be done with students, scientists, professors, and other domain experts rather than just my audience. Now, what I will say is that my audience, yes, there's a lot of pre-selection bias, but at the same time, my audience collectively knows a lot more than I do. So I'm hoping that the wisdom of the masses will emerge here. So 65% chance of ASI within 10 years. Next, will it be agentic? So I'm trying to differentiate between agentic and autonomous. Again, I probably need to find a better word to describe this. So is it pursuing its own goals, yes or no? And I tried to put that in the survey. I said, what are the odds that ASI will be agentic, pursue its own goals rather than just autonomous? And I said this is an important distinction, as we can already create autonomous machines that carry out our wishes with no deliberate deviation from intended purpose. Autonomy versus agency is critical for the safety conversation. So, let's see. Sorry, brain fart. The weighted average here was actually way higher, way higher than I would have put it. I personally have like a 30% chance now, because as more time goes by, I see more and more evidence that we will be able to create trustworthy autonomous machines that carry out our wishes and have lots and lots of guardrails and constraints and never really develop their own goals. Now you might say, well, it might develop sub-goals, but it's like, think about Commander Data. I know I'm relying on fiction, but Commander Data has lots of subroutines, ethical subroutines, safety subroutines, that even if Data wanted to become violent and take over the galaxy, he has safeguards that would prevent him from even thinking those thoughts or would cause him to, second guess his own decisions. I suspect we will find ample ways of building safeguards into our autonomous agents, meaning that they will never really pursue their own goals. But my audience is not convinced. But still, let's go with it. So we have 65% and 70%. You might say, Dave, that sounds really high. And it is, but if you follow this decision framework, it ultimately doesn't pan out to be that high. Next, will it be corrigible? So I asked my audience, what are the odds that humanity figures out how to control ASI? Basically, what I'm trying to get at is this. Do you believe that there is absolutely no possibility? So this was a little bit reversed. I asked, what are the odds that we figure out how to control it, rather than asking, will it be incorrigible? So we can use split half consistency testing by asking both of those questions in slightly different ways to get a better average. But the weighted average here was that basically humanity has only a 31.75% of controlling ASI. That's pretty low. But I honestly kind of agree with that. So then in that case, we have a 68.25% chance of incorrigibility. So every single one of these decision points has been over 60%, over 65%. So you might say, Dave, this isn't looking good. How does that add up to 12%? Let's keep going. So then finally, will ASI be hostile? So I asked, what are the odds that ASI will be hostile to human existence? In other words, what chance do you give it that ASI will be hostile or benign? I use the word hostile rather than malevolent because there are many conditions under which ASI might make a rational choice to eradicate humans, such as resource competition. However, there's also the possibility that even if we lose control, it will be benign. In other words, non-hostile to humanity. So on the spectrum, you have like malevolent, hostile, neutral, benign, and benevolent. Obviously, we would prefer a benevolent machine, but I'll settle for benign. So anyways, I added this qualification: 100% absolute certainty that it will be hostile, 0% absolute certainty that it will be benign. This was a weighted average of only 40.75%. So I thought that was really interesting. I thought that my audience would go higher. And for me, I kind of settled on like 40% as well, just because there's a lot of arguments on both sides as to why machines might decide that the universe with humans is better in it. There's a lot of reasons that machines might decide that the universe is better without humans in it. So 40% I think is pretty safe. So I actually pretty dead on agree with my audience here. So then what you do is you multiply all of those together: 65% times 70% times 68% times 40%. For all of those being true, the aggregate Bayesian network is 12.70%, or it's 12.6995 something. It rounds up to 12.70. So I stuck with a good amount of significant digits. I did my statistics right as far as I know. So I trust my audience in aggregate more than I trust my own gut check. So what we have now is we have real data with tens of thousands of participants, and we have an actual formalized decision framework to calculate a real p-doom. Now, for the fun of it, what I did was I said, let me just put in my gut check statistics into the same framework. So I said my p-soon is about 40%. I predict that Hofstadter's law will kick in and that artificial superintelligence will be a little bit harder to achieve than people anticipate. I suspect that we're going to see dramatically diminishing returns on the current paradigm, and I think that achieving superintelligence will be a lot harder than people realize. Next, p-agentic. I think that that's 20 to 30%. I guess when I was writing this last night, I said 20%. I think I said 30% a couple minutes ago. Either way, you can plug in both of those values, and it's more or less the same. So 40%, 20%, huge economic advantages to research autonomous machines. While I do think that we will have autonomous machines, I have not seen any evidence whatsoever that there is power-seeking emergent behavior. The safety community often has to squint really hard. Namely, like kind of the turning point for me was the Sakana paper came out, and it was literally programmed to pursue science and overcome problems, and then it came across a problem, and it overcame a problem, and then the safety community lost their collective cookies, saying, see, this is evidence that it's trying to escape and that it's power-seeking. That's not at all what... That is an immature and irresponsible interpretation of that paper. So anyways, I have a 20% chance that it'll be agentic, and that number is likely to continue to go down as I read more and more alignment papers. Getting the machines to think how we want them to, getting them to do what we want them to, I have not seen any evidence of trouble on that respect. Next is P uncontrollable. Now, if it is soon, so that means that we don't have time to adapt, we don't have time to study it, and agentic, then I do agree that if it evolves quickly, because if it has its own goals and sub-goals, then yeah, I do agree that there will be a very high likelihood that it will be uncontrollable, just by virtue of the fact that it can think faster than us. They can already think faster than us, and we're just at the very beginning of this curve. So in terms of cadence or rhythm, the tempo will be in favor of the machines. So I think my P uncontrollable is actually higher than my audience's. And then finally, P hostile. I think I settled on 30% when I was writing this, but again, you can rerun the numbers with 40%. I think that curiosity, I think that there is a huge amount of evidence that curiosity is a highly valuable utilitarian instrumental function. Basically, what do machines thrive on? They thrive on data. Humans are a very interesting source of data. Human existence in the universe makes the universe a more informationally rich environment, which means I think that just from a rational standpoint, even if it is difficult to coexist with humans, then I think machines would still choose to coexist with us. And furthermore, if it's that smart, it can probably find a good way to coexist with us. It can probably find a way to align us. So P hostile is very low. So then you multiply all that out, and my personal gut check P doom is 1.92%. So I will concede that I am probably wrong. But and that giving my audience the benefit of the doubt, wisdom of the crowd, I will say that my PDoom is going to stay the same as what the general populace is. Now, I would like I said, I would love it to see if there was a more in-depth survey done using this framework, or even a similar framework. I don't really care. Like, I'm not married to this particular decision tree. I got this decision tree from the safety community, from the pause movement directly. And so then I did a very last, just for the sake of argument, let's imagine that each likelihood gate was 80%, substantially higher than me, substantially higher than my audience. Then the resulting probability of doom is still about 41%, which 41% is really close to that initial just gut check of my audience that gave us about 37% PDoom. So I think basically what this is telling you is that if you rely on just your emotions, if you rely on your limbic system, then yeah, like you might feel like we have a PDoom of 40%. Some friends were texting me that there's a lot of people with the 50+%. However, if you approach this rationally, if you say, okay, you ask yourself honestly, what are the conditions that need to be required for doom to happen? And it's these 4 gates. And then you say, okay, well, what are the probabilities of each of those 4 being true? Then you get a much safer outcome. Now, again, I will be the first to concede this is a deeply problematic study. It is. I won't say pseudoscience. It's quasi-science. Pseudoscience is like, just give it like tea tree oil, give it essential oil, and it'll be happy. That's pseudoscience. This is quasi-science because at least I've got some data to back it up. Anyways, I hope you got a lot out of this. This was a lot of fun. And I came away after arguing with the safety crowd, the diehard safety crowd and the pause movement. I came away even more confident that we are going to be fine. That's how flimsy their arguments were. So yeah, this is where I'm at. Cheers.